Mr. Speaker, thank you. I'm Ben Dalton from TV Tokyo. I'm wondering how you feel about the American media's news handling of the report that Russian influence had a hand in the election outcome. Thank you.
Well, it's a perfect, look, again, this is an example of what I would mean by a watershed. In the old days, in the old order, we would have actually taken them seriously. We would have felt bad about it. We'd have been on defense for weeks. This is why I want us to use the term propaganda media, not news media. The entire story in the Post is a lie. It's a lie. It turns out that the Director of National Intelligence doesn't agree, the Federal Bureau of Investigation doesn't agree. We're not actually sure who at the CIA agrees because nobody speaks on the record, but somebody at the Post talked to a friend of theirs who once had a drink in Georgetown with a guy who had a card that said CIA, and I mean it, I'm really CIA, or something, and so they said, this is great. I mean, first of all, and this is one of those things where you just have to say to yourself, this goes back to why I find Nassim Taleb's essay on intellectual yet idiots so useful. You start with, and I'll close this, but I want you all to just follow me for a minute. You'll understand how big the change is going to be. First of all, you have the Obama administration cheerfully saying, gosh, we are so utterly incompetent, the Russians may have interfered with our election and we didn't know it. I mean, that's the heart of their defense, you know. Well, that really reassures me about the national security of the country. Second, you have Hillary, whose defense is apparently somebody from the FSB, which I think is the replacement for the KGB, apparently got to her, and the FSB convinced her to set up a secret server in her bathroom, which is an old Russian device. I mean, it's a, you know, honey trap used to mean sex, nowadays it means bathrooms. And they convinced her to delete 33,000 emails, and this same agent then convinced her apparently to lie about it, and therefore, it's, I mean, this is so, you have to ask yourself. I mean, when 7-year-olds come in and say, you know, my dog ate the homework, it's one thing. When former secretaries of state who are presidential nominees walk in and go, I think the Russians must have done it because it couldn't be that I was totally incompetent, a crook, and nobody believed me. I mean, you know, this is why we're in a different world. Political correctness is going to rapidly die, and we're going to be in a world in which we get to tell the truth. And the truth is, the Washington Post lied, just as the New York Times was deliberately propagandistic in its description of Dr. Price. And the rest of us ought to get in the habit of routinely calling them on it. These people are not news people. They are not reporters. They are propagandists. They write junk, and they write junk with a deliberate left-wing bias. And we ought to just take them to task every single time they do it. And on television, we ought to do the same. And I really admired Kellyanne Conway because she represented the new order. Every time somebody on MSNBC or CNN tried to go at her, she would reframe it. And she would not allow them to set the terms. And that's what we have to have when I talk about a movement. Every citizen has to be prepared to stand up and say, we're going to fight to make America great again. And if you don't want to fight to make America great again, we recommend you go home or we are going to run over you. Thank you all very, very much.